Okay, today we're going to tell the story of a river. Now, it's not the longest, or the widest, or even the most famous. In fact, at just over 6 miles, it's actually the smallest river in Devon. But its story? Well, its story is a powerful one. So let's get into it.
So our story starts right here, at the river's source, 200 meters above sea level. This is the River Sid, and it's going to be our main character. As it starts out, it just feels so wild, ancient and pure. But as you're about to see, this little river carries a much, much bigger story of change, of conflict, and, believe it or not, of hope.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? How can this tiny little ribbon of water, winding through just a couple of villages in one town, reflect the massive challenges that our entire environment is facing? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is quite a lot.
To find that answer, we first have to follow the river on its journey. We're going to start up here, at its wild source, and see what this river is supposed to look like before we get to what it's become.
The first thing you have to understand about the Sid is its hidden power. For every kilometer it flows, it drops 20 meters. That's a really steep gradient. It makes it what experts call a flashy river, which means after a heavy rain, this isn't some gentle little stream. Oh no. It becomes a torrent with enough force to literally carve its own path.
And in a natural setting, all that energy creates this, a really healthy, dynamic habitat. Up here in the upper reaches, the water's flowing fast, it's full of oxygen, and it's absolutely perfect for all sorts of wildlife, from tiny insects to birds. This is the river as it should be.
But then, as it flows into town, we see this. The river is completely, and I mean completely, transformed. It's been straightened, it's been deepened, and it's been locked between these high brick walls. And this is where our story really shifts, from the river's own journey to humanity's impact on its course. So let's take a look at how this all happened. We're talking about centuries of human intervention that have reshaped this river, often with consequences that, well, nobody really saw coming.
The changes started way back. A massive storm in 1322 naturally shoved the river's mouth east, but then in the 1700s, humans stepped in and decided to cut a new, straight channel to the sea. That's the one we see today. And much more recently, in 1974, this huge weir was built for flood control. Each step was a deliberate choice to try and tame the river.
Just look at this contrast. On the left, you have the wild, vibrant, living river, and on the right, you have the engineered channel. It's the same river, but these are two totally different worlds. And that right there, that's the central conflict of our story, the clash between a natural system and our attempts to control it.
And this right here, this might just be the single biggest villain in the story of the river's health, the school weir. At over 2.5 meters high, it's basically a concrete wall for fish. Migratory species like Atlantic salmon and European eels, they need to travel upstream to breed, and they simply can't get past it. It has, effectively, just choked off the lifeblood of the upper river.
One local source puts it pretty bluntly. From this point on, they say, the river is actually little more than an open drain. That quote just hits hard, doesn't it? It captures this feeling that in trying to control the river for our own benefit, we might have accidentally stripped it of its very essence. But the challenges aren't just the big physical structures. No, they're also biological and chemical threats. Let's call them the unwelcome invaders. Some of them you can see, but some are hidden, and they're all putting the river's ecosystem under immense pressure.
So let's start with a classic baddie of an invasive species, the signal crayfish. These guys were brought over to the UK from North America, and they become a total nightmare for native wildlife. They're bigger, they're more aggressive, they carry a plague that's deadly to our native crayfish, and to top it all off, their burrowing makes the riverbanks just collapse.
And trust me, they are far from the only threat. You've got invasive plants like Himalayan balsam and Japanese knotweed that are just smothering the riverbanks. You've got pollution running off from roads and farms, and then there's a more surprising and kind of controversial threat.
Yep, man's best friend. Now, according to the source material, the constant disturbance from dogs in popular spots actually keeps wildlife away.
It churns up all the sediment where insects live, and it can even introduce harmful chemicals from flea treatments right into the water. It's one of those pressures on a fragile urban river that we often just don't think about.
Okay, so after hearing all of that, you might think the story just ends there, right? A sad decline, but it doesn't. This is where the whole narrative pivots towards hope, because there's a really dedicated community that is fighting back to save their river.
And this isn't just wishful thinking either. There's a real, concrete plan. Groups like the River Sid catchment group are working on 5 key fronts. They're tackling those invasive species, they're restoring natural habitats, they're trying to find a way to get fish past the weirs, they're constantly monitoring water quality, and they're using natural methods to manage flood.
And what's the whole point? What's the ultimate goal of all this hard work? Well, it's simple, and it's actually really beautiful. It's to restore the ecosystem so that the key species that have been lost or are just struggling can finally come back and thrive again. We're talking about species like the incredible dipper. Seriously, this is the only songbird in the entire world that can walk along the riverbed completely underwater hunting for insect larvae. They need that clean, fast-flowing water, and that's exactly what these efforts are designed to protect.
And then there's the iconic kingfisher. They are just this flash of electric blue and orange, and their presence is a fantastic sign of a river's health. They need that clean water to spot fish, and they need steep, stable banks for their nests. Exactly what the habitat restoration work is trying to provide.
And finally, the elusive otter. As an apex predator, the return means the entire food web is healing, all the way from the insects and the fish right up to the top. Seeing an otter back on the River Sid, that's a sign that all this hard work is really paying off, bringing the river back to its full, wild glory.
So, the story of the River Sid might be a local one, but its message is absolutely universal. It shows how even our smallest natural spaces are affected by our choices, and it shows the incredible power of a community that just decides to take action. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What story does the river near you have to tell, and what part will you play in its future?